Dr. Bach, I'm very interested in the role of religion in literature. Can you please provide your insight on this topic?
Well, in 17th century England, we're still in an age in which religion matters a lot, and in which people do genuinely hold religious belief and go to church and take it very seriously. And so we shouldn't be surprised to find a great deal of religious literature. If I could let me just take three examples. One is the great poets whom we call the metaphysical poets in the early 17th century, John Donne, George Herbert, for example. And these are poets whose work has, at one and the same time, a tremendous sense of depression because of their awareness of human sin. The Christian theology works on the assumption that human beings from the Garden of Eden onwards are fallible, are weak, are corrupt, fall below the standards which they ought to aspire to. And so on the one hand, in this poetry, you get very, very deep depression. But on the other hand, you get a tremendous sense of elation and joy that all this sin is going to be forgiven because God so loves his creation that he sends his own son to die to pay the debt caused by the sins of mankind. And so this is poetry which has tremendous depths of depression, but also a tremendous sense of exaltation and joy. And then there's John Milton in the middle of the century, who was committed to the parliamentary cause in the Civil War. And he writes one of the longest and greatest poems in English literature, the Paradise Lost. And Paradise Lost is a fascinating poem because, among other things, the hero, in a way, in Paradise Lost is Satan who rebels against God, and yet Milton has to insist he's on the side of God, and so his religious belief is infused through that poem. And much of the poetry that Milton wrote, Samson Agonistes, for example, in the end of his life, is about the blind Samson when Milton himself was blind and in despair Samson is in despair at the victory of the Philistines, and Milton is in despair at the restoration of King Charles II. And then there's the Puritan writer John Bunyan. Pilgrim's Progress is a work that's often read today. But it would be wrong to say that religion is the only source of great literature in the 17th century. There are also writers who are much more secular, or whose work can be much more secular. There are all the Restoration dramatists and Restoration comedy. The greatest work of satire in English literature is written in this period, called Absalom and Achitophel by John Dryden, which is all about the religious exclusion crisis, the debate over James II. And in that work, it's very interesting to read that. The work satirizes the king himself. The king himself is made fun of, and in a very gentle way, but nonetheless, and indeed Dryden is a Tory. Dryden is himself actually a Roman Catholic. But there you've got the great work of satire. And then when you get into the early 18th century, works like Robinson Crusoe, you find British writers interested in a fantasy world, an imaginary continent that exists elsewhere. Eventually, that's to be Australia. Exploration and discovery is there and highly attractive to British readers as well. So there is religion there, but it's not the only thing. There's also satire, and there's also an interest in exploration.
Yes. So the religion is one of the major sources of inspiration for great literature.
Yes. Not the only one.
Thank you very much.